Good morning and good afternoon for those attending. I want to thank you all for attending today's webinar, Vision webinar, Mastering Your Vendor Database. Despite the name underneath my picture, I am not Karen Wills. My name is Sean Melville. I'm the Vice President of Business Development here at Strategicon and the moderator for today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to just cover a few housekeeping items, specifically related to some upcoming events that we'd like to make you aware of. So on December 5th, we have a new Straight Talk, and for those that are unfamiliar with Straight Talk, it's our series of interviews with industry experts, and the December 5th Straight Talk is titled Preparing for the Future, and our special guest is going to be Nick Muir, a partner with the Life Science Consulting Group. The discussion is going to center around things and matters that you really should be considering doing now in preparation for 2024. In January, we will be distributing a survey on Vision, our vendor management module. Please keep an eye out for it. It's an opportunity to get your opinions and experiences heard. We really strive and take seriously feedback, and your feedback is invaluable as we're building the next generation of tools for vendor excellence management. For those who are in the Northern Hemisphere, we all look forward to February and the opportunity to warm up down in Orlando for Scope. This year, we're going to be submitting some of our technology for Best in Show, and so we're going to shamelessly ask for your vote and support. If you are attending, please don't miss Anka's presentation, which is titled Clinical Business Operations Transformed, Harnessing AI for End-to-End Clinical Outsourcing and KPI management. Also, please note that we have a new blog series, and again, for those who are not familiar with our blog, please check it out under the resources aspect of our Strategicon webpage. Don't forget to download the resources that are in the handout section, including one of our blogs, as well as the slides that are going to be presented in today's webinar. We are recording the webinar, and afterwards you will all receive a link to access the recording, a link for the recording. And finally, if you do have any questions during today's webinar, please feel free to post the questions in our question sections in the panel. We'll be sure to get them to the presenters. We'll try to address them at the end of the presentation, but if for some reason we don't have an ability to respond to all of them, we will do so afterwards. So now that the housekeeping matters are out of the way, let me briefly introduce the panelists for today's webinar. Andre Anteescu is head of product here at Strategicon. Andre is a product designer and UX expert with over a decade of experience in the field and a background in computer science. He's extremely passionate about building products from the ground up, starting with research and strategy and ending with experiences that really delight customers and deliver for their businesses. Anka Kopiescu is our CEO here at Strategicon, and I like to say that Anka put her money and talent where her mouth is. She, frustrated with existing technology solutions, Anka created the Clinical Maestro platform, leveraging over 15 years of experience in clinical research, both from the sponsor and the service provider perspective. As a result of being the head of outsourcing, clinical outsourcing at BioMarin, and having experience at 2 global CROs, she's gained a tremendous amount of insight into clinical business operations. The Clinical Maestro platform addresses the entire clinical study financial process, from planning through outsource to the end of clinical contract and study analytics. Strategicon's Clinical Maestro platform and its sponsor modules, Portfolio, Source, Lead, and Vision, each reduce time and expenses associated in developing clinical trials from the beginning to the very end. So I want to thank both Andre and Anka for participating in today's webinar, and I'm going to turn matters over to Anka. Anka?
Well, thank you so much, Sean. Thank you for the audience. Again, we have a full room, and these webinars are so much fun. I wish it could be a bit more interactive. I wish I could hear your voices or see your faces. But look, you have an opportunity to chat and ask questions, and hopefully you can put a smile on your face and really deliver at least one takeaway from each webinar, whatever they may be. That's our goal. So I won't spend too much time on slides. As we've been refining these webinars, we put a little bit of concepts, topics, and we are seeing quite a variety of attendees coming from CROs, coming from pharma, different backgrounds, different services. So we always like to make sure that we are using the same nomenclatures and the concepts we are trying to talk about are well understood. Then we're going to go and give you an example of how you can find a needle in the haystack. And by the way, I do hope you like the blog that's attached. Please send me feedback. I'm getting feedback on the blogs. I'm writing about one a month. So it's really an attempt of gaining excellence through in vendor management using modern tools. And if we have time, and only if we have time, I'll give you a bit of a sneak peek into our next releases. So let's go to the concept. Okay, I don't know if we can go into presentation mode, but if not, that's also fine. So again, given that we have quite a mix of attendees and some may or may not be familiar with the concept of category strategy or category management, the simplest way I think about it, it's a way of grouping services in a similar bucket. And whether we call it category or not, the attempt is really to standardize the way we evaluate certain services, the way we select service provider, the way we designate them as preferred providers or not, the way we maintain our expectations on their performance and requalification over time. And this is being used across many industries. Obviously, it's a well-established concept within pharma. Although a lot of pharma companies have spent a lot of energy into defining what the categories are, you know, how do we define and evaluate CROs? Like, we can have 10 webinars on that subject. The reality is that there's been a high level of well, maybe too many silos in how we operate, meaning each pharma company has done it on their own, and too little communality or too little sharing of information has transpired in the industry. When you go on what we are trying to achieve, establishing a category management strategy, you'll see exactly what you mean. So once you define the category of, say, central lab, ideally you would have sourcing templates that are used for central lab only, and bid grids that are used for sourcing lab only. And then you ask the types of questions that are really evaluating the risk of that service. Again, a lot of investment, but siloed investment by different organizations. When it comes to performance, it's very important that you have the same language or the same standards when it comes to oversight. And obviously there is a big difference in risk assessment between a CRO, a consulting company, a company like us, like Clinical Master, that are delivering a digital solution. So establishing the right KPIs and making it an overload, very important at the category level. Again, what we are trying to achieve is quite simple. We are trying to simplify our workflow. We are trying to use unbiased concepts in the selection and qualification process. We are trying to achieve consistency and transparency. So these are the underlying concepts of category management. They tied very much with, can we go to the next slide? Sorry. With capability assessment. And I'm trying to stay away from the word qualification because it's a broader term. But what we are focusing on is the assessment of the best fit and the business capabilities of different service providers grouped by category. This is obviously used in two main instances. When you are onboarding a new vendor, and then you are you may or you may not have a category strategy for that vendor, but ensuring that that service provider meets the criteria set at the category level for that service. So it's very important that the business capability and the qualification is at the service level. So an example is looking just back last 10 years of the different CRO providers, how they went from providing core, what I think it's core CRO services like data management, clinical study management, to offering a variety of others, including technology services. So each of these services needs to be evaluated at the service level and not at the company level. That, of course, creates a lot of effort, because to qualify ICON or to evaluate the business capabilities of IQVIA, it's absolutely non-trivial, considering how many business lines I have, how many tools are being used by how many parties, and you run RFIs and you have questionnaires and security assessments. And it truly involves a lot of stakeholders and workflows and high level of coordination. And this doesn't stop at the onboarding, because depending on the risk of that category, service category, that is an ongoing process. So again, the objectives are quality management first and foremost, enhancing vendor performance, stronger oversight of the vendor portfolio, and the minimization of the portfolio risk. So these are the concepts that we are trying to illustrate in today's meeting. That's at least my perspective of it, and I'm curious about what you think. So Sean, can you help me run a poll?
Sure. So let me launch the first poll, and it reads, do you use category management framework in your organization? Please select 1. Yes, fully embraced. We have established categories, selection, and evaluation criteria. No, we embark best fit vendors for each trial based on trial needs, using a combination of RFI, RFP processes, or similar. Or 3, thinking about the benefits and best approaches to implement category management. So I was going to tease feedback on responses by saying the first 10 people will get a free turkey for Thanksgiving, but legal rejected. We're getting some good responses now, so give it another 30 seconds or so just to make sure everyone has an opportunity to provide a response. Some interesting responses coming in terms of the selection that is going to be the most one selected. So give it another 15 or so seconds to allow everyone an opportunity to vote. And gonna close it down in about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I'm gonna close it down, and I'm going to share the results.
Ooh,
interesting.
Much higher number than I expected.
That's what I was thinking as well for number 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have enough sophisticated audience, so we have to tailor to you. That's fantastic. I ran a similar poll about 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago, and the first column was like 30%, and considering the benefits was the other 70%.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's very interesting that if you combine the yes, or at the very least considering, you've got basically 75% of the folks are at least open about the needs and planning for category management, which I think is a very encouraging combination.
Yes, because I have been in the environment of the 22%, which is typically the biotech environment, and it's very real. It's first of all, no approach is right or wrong. So the biotechs need to be highly flexible. They don't have a lot of vendors. Why would you implement, category management when you have 3 studies and you've given them all to, one CRO? So it doesn't always make sense. I just want to make sure that I express this clearly. So category management is a concept, is a framework. It's by no means the best framework for everyone. And sometimes, and especially in my experience at BioMarine coming from rare diseases, finding the best fit vendor for a trial, it's what's important, not being that rigid boxed in the preferred vendor model. Where the green becomes a problem, the green line, is when you have lots and lots of vendors and you're still doing the RFI, RFP process, or when you have, multiple divisions that are, making their own decision. That is when not having some kind of central strategy is a problem. So I don't know. Let's see the next poll.
Yep.
Any other comment from you?
No, like I said, I was very encouraged to see 75% in either considering and or yes. I think that speaks volumes on the acceptance and understanding of the importance of it. So let me go to launch the second question. So is it easier to search vendor information in your organization? And again, we're only going to select one. Yes, we have a central vendor database. Somewhat, we have several databases, places to search for information, or 3. No, we don't have one. We generally rely on Excel trackers to centralize the information. So again, we'll give it a few minute or so to give everyone an opportunity to think about their internal organizations and what they currently are doing from a vendor information perspective. So again, interesting results showing up, especially when
we have 2 polls or 3. I don't remember.
What's that?
We have 2 polls or 3?
No, we have 3. We have a third one that's going to be afterwards, but these first 2 are just sort of teeing up the demo. So I'm just going to give you another 15 or 20 seconds. This is really interesting compared with the first question. So it is going to be, when you compare the 2 of them, an interesting response. So I'm just going to give it another 5 seconds and then I'm going to close it down. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I'm going to close down the results and I'm going to share. And it's interesting when you look at these responses with the first one, where there's a higher level of no's and a reliance upon Excel as a way to centralize information. So I don't know, Anka, what your thoughts are in terms of the responses on the second poll.
This is the state of the industry, if I can define it. We've done lots of interviews, and it's always refreshing to hear a new perspective. There are many databases. I mean, think about, you can find vendor information in many places. In financial system, is in the invoicing database, in whatever sourcing solution you may be using, in the Viva Vault, or maybe not Viva Vault, in the ETMF system, sorry, being impartial here, in a contract management system. The reality is there are many databases and places to search, and that is actually what I think it's a problem. And to bring them all together, because there is so little central vendor databases that deal with category management, with performance, with qualification, we have to rely on the Excel trackers to centralize information. I used to be completely dependent on the Excel tracker that I use, because there was no other way for me to find who's working on, on which study, doing exactly what. So I think this is the state of the industry, and that's the inspiration again for my blog, Finding a Needle in the Haystack.
And it's a challenge when when it butts heads with a desire for organizations to have a high degree of transparency and visibility in terms of who their vendors are, what are they qualified for, just allowing the organization to have a better handle on all aspects of vendor management and vendor performance, it's a challenge when you've got either disparate systems or you're relying upon an Excel tracker. You don't have an ease and a quick ability to have that transparency and visibility.
Yep, I think with these, let's go back to the deck. We have only 2 slides, but I think we kind of covered the upcoming ones. So I'm just going to spend a little time on it because we want to get to the demo. But it's always good to hear the audience voice. Again, sorry, we can't be all in a meeting doing this. But the next slide is it's a summary of the industry pain points. And this slide actually, or what the point in this slide came from really many interviews that we had, and by no means are all of the pain points. And we ask question when you are willing to listen, you get a fair amount of complaining. So we like to actually hear to the complaining. Because it's the only way that we can collectively come up with a better solution. But if I think about the big buckets, are there right on top in blue? The big problems are too many systems sometimes, too many owners. There are really too many cooks in the kitchen of touching vendors. And in each of them has its own twist, has its own needs, is looking for something slightly different. If it's using a system, guess what? It's just not talking to another system. It's too much effort. We heard this over and over again, sometimes hundreds of hours. And by the way, when it comes to governance, we actually did a lot of interviewing on the CRO side. We've only limited to the CRO, so I don't want to say that we covered the service provider world, but they're saying it takes us a lot of time and effort to produce a governance stack, to produce a metrics dashboard. And then you go back to the sponsor and say, it takes me forever to do the same, to evaluate the answer. There's no trending, everything is manual. So lots of complaining, which again, if you want to complain, send us an email because we should open a complaining line, but we do want to hear the pain points. And then at the end of all these efforts, when you have so many systems, you have many owners wanting data from quality, from audit, from finance, from sourcing, from procurement. And then you are tired of looking for information, looking for the needle in the haystack. Everyone is saying, yeah, all this effort is not paying off because there aren't enough analytics and there's not enough trending. It's not enough of what we need, just to put it at the high level. And then we heard, especially the quality people, concerned about compliance risks, compliance to oversight, regulation, inconsistencies and audit findings, reusing vendors that don't have stellar performance simply because the communication did not transpire to the study team, for example. And so this is a summary of the pain points. You have a pain point, please send us an email and you recognize yourself in the pain point, please tell us so survey. So going back to the next slide is how we are trying to pull our brains around finding a solution. If you can go to the next slide, Andre, or I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you may be a bit delayed, Anka.
Okay, well, I'm done. So what we are trying to do is put in place a solution for category management and oversight. We are focused on the red box today and some elements of the qualification. But if you look at the bubbles, it's all about category management, service provider qualification, risk scoring, as well as ongoing vendor performance and governance. And what you are about to see today is a sneak peek into our capabilities data bank, how we use the advanced search engine, how you can pull documents and data in a central hub. And at the end of the day, how you can empower your service provider to be an actor in your vendor management system. So I think with this, we can probably go to the demo.
Yeah.
I think we have
there was
one
another
more
part around integrations, but I think we can maybe show that after the demo.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So go to the demo. And I will jump into the system here in Vision. Again, I have other modules at the top, but we're going to focus just on Vision right now. But these work in relationship to seamlessly with the other modules in Maestro as well. So in Vision, first focus would be category management. So we have our vendor portfolio loaded in, and again, there are different ways of doing this, either one time via an import from Excel or periodically pulling from or pushing to other systems. And again, that's part of that slide I alluded to earlier. But once you have this information in the system, and again, I have just around 8 vendors here, but imagine with a larger database that you can do things like show me all my CROs, which are doing oncology, for example, and you would basically have a report specifically on that. Again, I have a simple portfolio here, but this scales to a larger one as well, and you have a multitude of other options and filters by running these reports in Vision. So let's see how this data is actually structured inside of a vendor profile. So I'll open vendor 1, since that was the result of my report. And we have these modular sections under the vendor. So we have a general space to put contact information and any referrals for the vendor. We have a specialization section, which is very important for deriving the type of capability assessment and the sort of the place of the vendor within the Vision ecosystem. These capabilities are completely customizable. We offer some out of the box, but of course, they can be customized by your organization because people have different structures for their categories and services. And we have a file management and a communication engine present throughout the system, also on the specialization listing, so you can attach various capabilities documents, for example, on the CRO line, or you can leave a comment. And now this comment goes both internally and externally, so you can use it for discussing with the internal team as well as with the vendor team. This is an important point, which I don't think I mentioned until now, is that the vendor can also be invited into the system under specific controlled roles. So you can have a process by which they are keeping their profile updated in certain areas. Another important part of the profile are the mergers, so the M&As. It's not going to apply to all of the vendors, but for the vendors where it applies, I think it's invaluable because you can track a history of the M&As, the type of acquisition, and for what services that acquisition was made. So, for example, in 2021, CoreLab was acquired by vendor 1 for Core Lab capabilities. So you can track the evolution of a vendor and also make sense of the different name changes that they might have along the way, because I know that is an issue. So moving on to the proposals and agreements. we have different types of data. We keep your service agreements, rate cards, work orders, and change orders. And again, this data can be pulled in and synced with other systems. So you might have a contract management system for keeping your work orders. Those can be pulled in here to reflect accurate data about your vendor portfolio. It's all about aggregating data in the same place and breaking up silos, not necessarily replacing those systems. So for service agreements, again, different types, NDAs, MSAs, SSAs, you can see have configurable expiry alerts. So I have a little red dot here because this NDA is expiring in 46 days. And if I actually open it, I will see that the expiration alert is configurable. So depending on your internal processes, you can set this to a larger or lower amount. And of course, you can track the actual NDA and any communication related to it. We also host rate cards for vendors. You can keep current and historical rate cards as well, with the rates per country for the resources of the vendor. And if you're keeping historical rates here, you can also compare them. So let me go back there, and I'm going to compare the two rate cards. And I don't think these actually have a difference, but I'll give you a hint around what you can compare. So you can either pivot on the resource. So for example, let's see the biometrics executive senior. So this would give you a comparison across countries for that specific resource, or you can pivot on the country. So for example, show me all of the resource prices in the US, and then give a comparison across them.
This is the functionality we also have in Source for a different purpose. And actually in Portfolio, our clinical study planning and budgeting tool. Rate cards are very important when you apply them to a use case of modeling a new study or planning a study or evaluating a potential change order. You can model or look at the budget using the preferred rate cards. In Source, the rate cards are being used as a due diligence engine from many perspectives. Most importantly, you can verify in a certain B type whether or not the agreed rate card has been applied. And actually, you can see what rate card has been applied, because imagine having here 10 different rate cards. So that becomes very important in a change order reconciliation process. So I just wanted to give you a perspective also in our Source application at the vendor level. You can store fixed rate agreements. It goes beyond just vendor management from a category management perspective. But since we have a complete integration with Source, if this is something important in the central hub, we could potentially bring it as well.
And I do have a question from someone in the audience at this time. I thought it might be good to bring it up. Someone asked, do you have benchmarking data to support our rate card negotiations?
We do. We do, but we do not offer access to a rate card benchmark database. We rather come back with a report. We take your data, and then we come back and we tell you in which percentile you are versus where the benchmark is today. But yes, that information exists.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you both. I'm just going to move over to the work orders section, where you can track work orders, change orders, and the contracts with relation to a vendor. An important point that I will mention here, as you can see on the screen, is that vendor one is main vendor on a specific contract and also a subcontractor on another one. So if I open this respective work order here, besides tracking, the general information, timeline, what's the scope, and the price for those services. We also track if there are any subcontractors and for what services and what amount. An important point also who contracts and who manages those subcontractors. And the interesting thing is that the subcontractors themselves are part of vision, so they have a profile, they have a history of themselves that you can access. Again, something which can come from a contract management system, something which can be integrated with sources. Depends where you do your outsourcing and contracting.
And I just want to comment on this when this feature, which is one of my favorites in Vision, and maybe the audience would recognize the scenario that I will describe. Oftentimes, the subcontractors go into the PTC category of a full service contract. They are, of course, all listed, but they may be managed by the CRO. And if you have enough of those sitting in some, PDF attachments or in the project plans at the study level, but somewhat get lost by the sourcing team, that can be a problem. And you can have this mix of relationships in which you might have, let's say, contracted directly with an eTMF solution provider, but on another study, it's contracted by a CRO. On another study, it's contracted by a different CRO. And then you have this web of relationships. When you put the category hat on top, these can become really non-trivial in terms of finding the information. And then later on, and that's more for the sourcing side of it, it's making sure that the subcontractors on the study are operating smoothly in a change order environment in which that may not be managed directly by you. But this gives a full visibility into all the relationships that one provider may have, not only as a provider, but at the service level of that provider. So it can get pretty granular.
So I'm going to jump to the next section for the audits and qualifications. Right now, since we focus mostly on category management, these are essentially trackers of these activities, which you can pull from QA system. We also plan in 2024 to be able to run these through the system via a surveying mechanism, but you can keep audit and qualification data. For example, what types of qualifications did you run for what services and in which category, who was the team lead, and what documents and communication you have on those items in Vision already. And of course, similar to the alert system I presented in the agreements, you can have alerts on an audit expiring as well here. Another important point that Anka mentioned was around the governance section. So for governance, we track the preference status and the tier of the vendor, the team members involved in the governance. So this is important because you can track both the governance role and the member of the governance team, and these are both internal, meaning sponsor contacts, and provider contacts. And related to the preparation of the governance meeting, we have an area where we can put various governance documents. These can be oversight plans, can be other types of documents as well. So you can use this to prep for the future meetings, as well as document past governance activities. And speaking of the meetings themselves, you can also have a calendar of meetings with participants, both from the internal and the external side, where you can also track the meeting minutes or any other artifacts from those respective meetings. You can also use this to plan future meetings as well. And these, they can be QBR, they can be different types of governance meetings.
One nice thing about this, the vendor ability to access vision is that, of course, they are major actors in the governance process. So you can make them responsible for keeping the QBR calendar. You can make them responsible for loading the meeting minutes. You may be doing it already today, but it's not going to be in SharePoint or in email. It's going to be quite clear in the system. And then you allow them the same level of visibility, obviously, because you are all looking at the same meeting minutes. You are all looking at the same information. You can easily pull it on the screen. And everybody has access to it the same way. And the other point I wanted to bring is Vision can connect to a DMF solution. It has a different purpose than adding governance meetings and minutes and trackers to the respective vendor oversight folder. But the two systems do not overlap. They actually complement each other. So the integration between the two is quite powerful.
Yeah. So we talked a bit about these internal, external contacts. So we have a place to track provider contacts under the vendor. And this can be used both for sort of archival purposes as well as inviting those respective stakeholders into the system. So in this example, Tommy is actually active in the system on the vendor side and can update certain information based on their role. Okay, so next up we have two sections I'll actually not enter today. They're more related to source, the integration to source, but I'll explain them high level. So you can, if you used fixed unit templates with some of your vendors for a category, say like biostats or data management, you can specify them in the system. So you can say that with vendor one, I have a current fixed unit template which specifies that an IMV is 2,000 per visit. And once you use that in sourcing, we will cross-check the cost they give you in the proposal versus what is agreed in the template, and we'll highlight any variances. So it's similar to what Anka said. At the rate card level, this is more at the unit cost, fixed unit cost level. And task grids, vendors can also load their own internal task grid into the system and map to the sponsor. So in this way, they can essentially upload the budget during proposal bidding faster because they don't have to map to the client. Since they mapped once, it's in the system, then they can just simply upload the proposal. So again, related to source, so I'll skip them, but that's a high-level description. The last section is an aggregation of all of the documentation and the communication you have with a specific vendor. So you can filter all of your documents by file type, order them by extension, or simply search them. So I remember I had an imaging audit with this vendor. So if I search for imaging, basically I immediately found it. Or I remember that I had, for example, a study with the code ASP, and I already found the proposal and the scoring grid. It's a similar idea with the communication. So all of the internal and external communication that you have with this vendor is documented here. And this is, again, at the vendor level. If I go on Vision, the master level, which shows me all of my vendor portfolio, you can do those types of things across your whole vendor portfolio. So I can go to my proposals and agreements, see all of my service agreements across all of my vendors. Let's see what's basically maybe expiring in January. So we have a section come up here, or go to my documents. Again, all of my documents across all of my vendors, so I can search for certain keywords or filter on certain reports. So
Andre, what's the advantage of using this approach versus putting documents in folders like, I don't know, Dropbox or SharePoint?
Well, it's the keyword search and the fact that they stay related to a specific entity. So you know, if it's in a folder, you don't have a relationship, let's say, to an audit entity per se, which has other metadata related to it. So a part of it is centralization, breaking the silos, being able to find it faster. The other part is relating it to another entity. If you think of like a graph network of items, so you can basically see what's related, establish the relationships, and find information you know, quicker, essentially.
Okay. So why don't we take a pause? We're actually at the tail end, but let's do the second, no, the third, sorry. Let's do the third poll, and then we have a tiny bit of the demo left. And I think we'll be right on time for the hour.
So this is a tee up for the next section that Andre is going to show concerning qualification. So I'm going to launch, and this poll, you will be able to select two items. So which aspects of business qualification are a pain point for your organization? Is it manual templates, Word or Excel RFIs, multiple systems, different surveying tools, unclear processes, the order of events, who's responsible, effort to coordinate internal and external stakeholders, or ongoing qualifications following processes post-onboarding. So as I said, you have an opportunity to select two out of those 5 items and give it about another 30 seconds or so on this topic. I know qualifications, vendor qualification, excuse me, is an extremely critical component to the vendor selection process. So interesting to see what the responses will be from the attendees. So give it another 30 seconds or so, and then I'll close and we'll have an opportunity to review the answers.
Okay, this is going to be a little harder to analyze, but I'm still want to see if one of the answers takes the lead
so
somewhat.
I think the one that I suspected is the one that jumped off the page, but and that's the challenge of multiple systems.
Yeah, and we heard it. We heard it in the pain points. Actually, last year at the PCMG conference, and I'm not sure if there are PCMG members in the audience or not, but PCMG is the European Pharmaceutical Outsourcing Group, and they have an absolutely outstanding conference every year. And one presenter last year talked about the pain points of qualification. I shall not name this person, but a leader from a top company. And it gave the audience quite a staggering number. Actually, I could not stop thinking about it. Is that the average qualification cost of a new vendor is $40,000. That is without the inflation, right? This is $22. But it has to do with exactly that, using, you know, IT uses a tool, then you use SurveyMonkey, then you put an Excel. If you count the hours on both sides reviewing the answers, and we have to provide answers in Excel, and boy, it's just not easy. It takes a lot of energy and effort. So multiple systems, it's a very big one. I would say it's the effort to coordinate internally and external has to do a lot with the multiple systems. And then I would, as a service provider, absolutely complain about the manual templates that are being used. It was hard when I was on the sponsor side, creating them and analyzing the answers and scoring and having people comment. Boy, it's very hard on the other side too, as a service provider. So.
Yeah, it's interesting that you know, the other 4 are pretty much aligned in terms of all being somewhat equal, and then the multiple systems, but they all are interrelated in a lot of ways. So I'm going to give the presenter rights back over to Andre so he can finish up with the rest of the demonstration focused on the qualification component of Envision.
Yeah, and if we have time, since I think the most voted one was the multiple systems, we can maybe go back to the integrations slide if we have a couple of minutes at the end. So next part on the qualification workflow. So I'll jump back to the provider profile here. So we already saw how you can customize your categories and services in the system to assign to your vendor portfolio. So what we're bringing next is a customizable capabilities assessment workflow per each of those categories. So you can view, for example, for provider one, how they are, at what step they are in data management. So they're just starting out on that track. They're not qualified. Their capabilities haven't been assessed. But if I switch here to, for example, something like Central Lab, we are basically in a more advanced state for that. So also notice that the steps are completely customizable per category. So you could have like a general capabilities assessment workflow that you can use on all of your categories, but as you get more sophisticated, you can customize these per category. And for biostats, this vendor is actually, we went through all of these, the workflow for the capability assessment. The other two categories are sort of new. Maybe they got, several M&As, maybe they got new capabilities. We have to assess them. So you can clearly see the snapshot of this with the traffic lights at the bottom here, and you can check the status of each in the workflow analyzer. Now, in terms of how this is actually tracked into the system, it has a whole setup phase that we're not going to have time to walk through today. But if I click on data management here, I can get a detailed view of the track in terms of capabilities assessment. So I can see all of the steps, and of course, these are customizable specific to your organization. I can see the due dates for each. I can see who's responsible for them, and I can have attachments, descriptions, and communications for each. These can be synced to external QA systems. So for example, we might have a survey or a qualification event on one of these steps, can be synced to something from Maestro, or can be basically responsible on the respective owner. So we also have alerts. So service qualification is due in 10 days, but we still have not completed the profile. So this is what we're building right now. And again, this is per service data management. I can view here other categories for the vendor. And you can start with something simple. You can start with simple general qualification or capabilities assessment workflow, and then evolve to something more sophisticated. Or if you already have such a process, you can directly embed it into the system.
Andrei, a couple of questions for you, going back to the pain points. So can these be used by any stakeholder that has a role, meaning IT can use it, QA can use it, procurement, whomever? How?
So in the setup of this workflow, we basically assign the groups and the roles responsible for these steps, and that will translate in some specific owners who are responsible for those steps. So that's how it's linked. Each of these sections, for example, the audit requirements will be under a QA team's responsibility, and will have a specific ownership in terms of people from that group.
How is this solving the big pain point of needing multiple systems? Would you need multiple systems to do the surveying, or would you need to fit into other systems
again, the end goal of Vision is that we can also we will also be able to do the surveying and the qualification and the in Vision. But if you have existing systems, you can link them to Vision. So we would integrate with that. We would have a process flow that when you have a specific qualification event in the QA system, we would basically complete this step here and we would move on. So it really caters to both approaches.
Okay, I know we have only 4 minutes left. I don't know if we have time to cover the rest of the slides, but you have the deck. I wanted to make sure that we are answering questions if we are getting some through. Sean, are there any questions from the audience?
Just one other question, and we sort of touched upon it, but maybe we can expand a little bit further, which is concerning the flexibility of the system in terms of clients having an ability to set up its own categories, criteria, or another aspects. So maybe I think we touched upon it a bit, but maybe we can expound upon it to help help the individual with the question.
Andre? Or if you want, I can answer.
Yeah, maybe you can take a stab and then I'll complete after.
Yeah, the system is designed for self-configuration, but we are also trying to achieve standardization. So we know that when you use Excel tools, there's no limit to what you can do, right? I can type anything I want, I can create any kind of filter, and then I can make it my own. And that's the very reason why using manual templates in Word and Excel end up being a pain point, because there's just no standardization whatsoever. At the same time, we don't have a crystal ball to identify all the possible categories and all the possible nuances that you may have. So I think it's about striking the balance. We are trying to bring in standards, and we know that standards are possible. There are multiple standards in our industry. The DIA, ETMF reference, the CDs, many. So we are trying to establish some categories with definitions, and hopefully people will agree that what we call a CRO, it is what they call a CRO, and what we call a DCT is what they call it. And then hopefully we'll bring some common language among each other, and which I think that this industry is really needing. But we can completely tie people's hands. I tend to try to push it. Let's see, how far can we go with pushing a standard? And then some point is like, nah, we gotta really add something else in. But we're building flexibility in self-configuration, but we are trying to be a little bit careful with the systems. That there's some systems in which you can pull any. There is an other category for everything. You can create instantly another field. Technologically wise, is not complicated, but we actually purposely try to restrain it a little bit, because back of our mind, we're trying to push an industry standard with your help and your collaboration. So maybe too long of an answer.
No, thanks, Zach. I don't know, Andre, do you have anything?
Yeah, so yeah, we definitely want to embed it in a workflow, and we usually look like, we analyze like how sponsor one does it. Okay, you have these fields and you have this, these namings and so on, and then we look at sponsor two, which has a different structure, and that ultimately try to understand, what's the job that both of those structures do, kind of boil it out to the essence, and design that workflow in the system. And of course, that's going to have some needs of being customizable for each sponsor to, make it sort of internally viable, like naming and so on. But ultimately, there's like a backbone which is structured for both.
Great. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I want to first thank Anka and Andre for the presentation on a topic that I think is near and dear to many companies in terms of the struggles that they have on a daily basis. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank the attendees for carving out time out of a busy day, and we're at the end of the year, which is always a hectic time. So I want to thank those. And just a quick reminder about the handouts in terms of the blog and the availability of the slide deck. And we are going to be sending out the link for the recording in the next day or so. So again, want to thank everyone for the time. If there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And if there's any interest in learning more about what we're doing and what we're looking to accomplish from an industry perspective, we're always happy to engage in those types of conversations. So again, from everyone's perspective, I don't know if any last minute comments from Anka or Andre?
I just thank everyone. I love having these meetings. I regret not being able to have them in person. We're talking about having an in-person series. My only comment to you is first, thank you. But really give us your feedback, or just whatever they may be, good, bad, critical, positive, an idea for the next blog. There isn't enough thought leadership in this industry. And we're trying to change that. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Anka. Andre, anything last minute before I turn off?
I echo Anka's thoughts.
Great. Well, again,
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. And if you're going to be celebrating Thanksgiving, a good holiday next week. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.